everybody, and welcome to another installment of Vintage Mego. I am Brian, your host, and yes, this is the follow-up to our video last week of looking at the 1977 Mego catalog. I will leave a link to the earlier installment here in case you haven't seen it. This is part 2 of our look at one of the more important years in Mego history, and I received a lot of interesting comments, and some people really didn't like my music choice, but I did, and that's why I chose it. But the one I wanted to pick up on is a few folks made some comments that reflect a strange myth surrounding Mego. A lot of people think the minute that Kenner's Star Wars toys came out, the company was in trouble, and that's far from the truth. This is something I want to get into in more detail down the road. Having Star Wars did not help Mego. In fact, it hurt them in the boys category. That is a fact. But you have to understand that it hurt every company in the boys category that didn't have Star Wars. It hurt Hasbro. It hurt LJN. It hurt Ideal. It hurt Remco. All of these companies had the same problem. And Mego still had magnificent years in the 1970s. Their financial issues didn't really start until the early 1980s, and there is a myriad of factors. I know a lot of toy journalism says, the one sentence of they passed on Star Wars, then they went bankrupt, but that is a gross oversimplification. It's a very lazy way of saying it, and the real story is more complicated and might actually be a little boring, but I will get into that in a later date. So yes, 1977 was a fantastic year for Mego, but it was far from their last good year. So let's take a look at the catalog, and I'll give you a little breakdown of some important points of history after. Flintstones is a real departure from Mego and an interesting experiment. Something I just recently discovered is that it actually came out of the Mighty Mightor deal. If you haven't seen my episode on that, I'll leave a link here. But basically, Pin Pin Toys of France asked Mego to get the Mightor license to produce an action figure. That cartoon was running in France at the time and was a big deal. There was like a lot of Mightor merchandise. Mego went to Hanna-Barbera and obtained the rights. And of course, Mightor was completely dead in North America. No one had remembered him. But they decided to pick up the Flintstone license because the Flintstones was very active in syndication. And I certainly remember the Flintstones being on every day at lunch on CTV. So this was made a lot of sense. It was not a smash, but it is kind of like one of the cooler things Mego did. And this is a highly coveted collectible now. Speaking of daily syndication, the Our Gang line was in its second year. This was hoping to capitalize on the popularity of reruns of the Little Rascals or Our Gang shorts. I don't know why, but it just didn't take off for Mego. It ran 2 years, it sold moderately, and they got rid of it. I personally loved watching the Little Rascals shorts as a kid, but it just didn't catch on in the world of superheroes and apes. So first off, I want to talk about Starsky and Hutch. This was a major year of expansion for the line. They not only added the car, but 3 characters in the forms of Dobie, Huggy Bear, and Chopper. I don't think these ancillary characters sold all that well. I actually remember seeing them on clearance as a kid, but Starsky and Hutch was a strong seller for the duo and, of course, the car. For another year, Mego canceled the line in 1978. That's because the series got canceled. Otherwise, Starsky and Hutch was a strong seller, and it lasted 3 years, which is a good turn in the toy industry. Also, just want to point out the prototype outfit on Huggy and Dobie. Huggy has that cool John Boy hat. They did not include him with it. And Dobie's outfit came out blue, not white, as we see here. Mego is always trying to spread out into other sections of the store, and the games aisle was always an obsession that they had. They really had some ambitious stuff for 77. I really like Mice Hockey and Them Bones, and the Nessie and Bigfoot games are fun. Their big electronic items actually did get out there in some way. These things look clunky as hell, but they were state-of-the-art technology at the time. This was the second year for the Muhammad Ali line, and they did propose some extensions. Some of this stuff got out, like the boxing gloves and the inflatable bot bag did get made, but the myriad of opponents did not. Some of these head sculpts did get recycled. You may recognize the 12-inch Lex Luthor, or at least an early version of it, and these were all sculpted by Ken Scheller, the same guy who sculpted the 12-inch Superman the movie line. There's some really neat heads in there. I really like the Manila Mauler and the Carrot Kid, but they were not meant to be. The Ali line did not take off the way they thought it would. This was the second year for the Comic Action Heroes. There were 2 extensions planned, one in the form of the Batcopter and the other with Spider-Man and the Exploding Tower. We just got some beautiful concept artwork from that, from what appears to be Neil Adams Continuity Studios on the Mego Museum. Just amazing. I wish it had gotten made, but only the Batcopter was added to the line this year. Comic Action Heroes would return in 1978 in a severely truncated form. Then it would be retooled into Pocket Superheroes, which would last until Mego's demise. This is one of the longest-lived lines Mego has, if you consider that the Pocket Heroes is basically the same concept carried over and just a rebranding. All the plush is from a company Mego owned called Samet and Wells. This is a plush manufacturer, I believe, that was on Long Island. And actually, it is the source of the Mego warehouse fire myth that I discussed in Mego Myths. This is basically where that story comes from, and that there was something that caught fire at that factory, but it was not necessarily a toy warehouse. This year, they got the license for not only the Walter Lantz characters, but King Kong himself, and it was Mego's first big push into plush. Dino De Laurentiis' big-budget remake of King Kong deserves its own episode of Vintage Mego. But Mego really did an amazing job here. They had the master toy license, and they tried everything they could to make Kong a big deal. I will discuss this further. The best thing I can say, the best anecdote I have about it was I asked about how the license negotiation was to Neil Kublin, and he said, it wasn't unfair. And that was all he really had to say. So it burned brightly, but not for a long time. Happy Days got a major expansion. The Fonz got some friends to play with and a place to play. I've always found it interesting that they chose to do Fonzie's Garage rather than Arnold's as a playset. Fonzie was a huge seller for Mego. It was just a massively popular character. The other figures just never really caught on the same way. This line did manage to last one more year, so Happy Days got 3 good years, and that's a nice sign of a quality toy line. But Fonz was the star of that show. 1 million BC was another item that was left over from 1976. Mego did propose an extension to the line in the form of the Treehouse playset, which, remarkably enough, is not the Planet of the Apes or Action Jackson Safari House. It's a new tooling. It's a new item, which is shocking, actually. It did not have the legs to remain till 1978. The cave people were kind of tepid sellers and ended up in the clearance aisles. That's why you find a lot of them with Child World stickers. This by no means cost Mego that much. I mean, it was an internally developed line with no licenses, so it's one of those things you take a shot at, and if it works, great. If not, you're really not out that much. Even though they're at the very back of the catalog, Micronauts would turn out to be one of the biggest success stories of 1977. It is an innovative and clever toy line developed by Takara. Even though they're at the very back of the catalog, Micronauts would turn out to be one of the biggest success stories of 1977. It is an innovative and clever toy line developed by Takara in Japan, and we'll do a whole history of the Micronauts here soon. It's all about timing as well, and Mego spent much of 76 developing the Micronauts when there really wasn't a demand for space toys out there. But things changed in May of 1977 when Star Wars premiered. Kids ran to toy stores hot to pick up all the latest Star Wars characters, and of course we know that they got an envelope and a promise that Christmas. Well, the Micronauts were there. They were on shelves. They were interesting space characters. And even when Kenner finally did get product to the market, it was all compatible with the Micronauts, which made the Micronauts Mego's best-selling category in 1978 and subsequently 1979. These were hot years for Mego and the Micronauts. The Micronauts would outsell the world's greatest superheroes by 3% that year, but this may surprise you. Their best-selling category for 1977 wasn't action figure-based. It was the celebrity dolls. They accounted for 26% of all sales for the company. That is a massive number when you think about it. And I say that to hopefully give you a better perspective of how the company worked. It isn't just all about the action figure category. Mego was always looking to expand their presence in a toy store, and that meant every single aisle. Also wanted to mention, if you haven't already heard, we do have a magazine out called Toy Ventures. We're on issue 2, which features a in-depth look at the Mego Doctor Who line from the UK. If you're a fan of this channel and vintage toys, you may want to check it out. The links are below. So that is my look at the 1977 Mego catalog. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will be doing more of this in the future. I'm going to go through my entire library of catalogs. I might start with a smaller one next time. I'd welcome your feedback on this episode, and I'd love to know what 1977 Mego toys were your favorites, if you were lucky enough to be a kid back then. We also will continue the discussion over at the forums at MegoMuseum.com and MegoMania, our Facebook group, where your voice is very welcome. If you are new to this, I hope you'll consider hitting like and subscribe. This is what we do every week. I'm also very grateful for you watching this. I really appreciate all your comments. I read every one and your likes, and I really appreciate the support. Until next time, folks, take care, talk toys, not others, and be well.